I'm Maria Menounos, and you're tuned in to AfterBuzz TV, the ESPN of TV talk. Now, let the buzz begin.
Hi, guys and gals. Thank you for tuning in today to the most dangerous animal of all after show, episode 1. I'm Latoya Blakely, and I am joined today by my spectacular co-host. I have Lisa Macy, who is a native of California, and she has a strong interest in California history.
Absolutely. All things California history, baby. Yep.
And then also Cody Epperson, who can't say no to a good mystery. So I'm excited to have them both here today. I'm excited to get started in this conversation about the most dangerous animal of all.
Oh, yeah.
We have a lot to talk about. We're going to get to know the key players in this story. We also have a very chilling special segment and interesting news that you don't want to miss, so make sure you stay tuned throughout the entire show. Let's get started with overall thoughts. Lisa.
I get that a lot. That's okay. I am loving it so far. So good, so juicy. I don't know. I am loving this first episode. I'm excited to see what's coming next.
Yeah. What about you, Cody?
I am all about it. I'll be honest. So far, I'm a little confused. There's a lot of names, a lot of things being, a lot of information in the. I mean, the case itself is very confusing, which is why it was open for so long.
Yeah.
But I'm wrapped up. Like I was sitting on my couch, just like, okay, I gotta know how this ends.
It is such a good show. Yeah, it just pulled me in, and you talked about so many names. I have like pages and pages and pages of notes.
Yeah, me too.
Which is necessary, right?
Absolutely.
To keep everyone like kind of in line and not to forget them. So let's get started with the first person that we're introduced to, and it's Gary Stewart. And we find out that he's been adopted by these people, by a family, when he's 3.5 months old.
Right.
But I think it's probably often the case with kids who've been adopted. They want to know the story of their birth parents. They want to meet them. They want to know why they were given away.
Right.
And so we go down this path with Gary about like finding his birth parents. Cody, can you tell me your first impressions of Gary when we're first introduced to him?
When we first see him, I didn't think anything was like too out of the ordinary. I was like, oh, this man, like he's going on this journey that he thinks that he is the son of the Zodiac Killer, and him and oh my gosh, I forgot her name, but they wrote the book together, and I was like, all right, we're gonna see what's going on, because there's so much information that we're trying to figure out, and I didn't get anything odd about him. I was like, all right, I'm interested to see what his story is.
Yeah. What about you, Lisa?
The thing that struck me so much was the pain that he still carries with him to this day. He talked a lot about the fear of abandonment, never going away. He talked a lot about the primal wound that adoptees have. Was I not loved enough? Why was I given away? So that's what struck me, is all these years later, this pain that he's still carrying, feeling like he wasn't worthy enough to be kept. This is even before he discovered later on more about his father. He just was carrying so much pain for just being given away.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that's what stuck out to me, and I have a lot of notes jotted about things that he said. He is super successful professionally, and I think later on we found out that he owns a business and he employs 140 people.
Right.
But he's been married 5 times.
Yeah, that was the fact that blew my mind.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, like he has a whole other like thing going on.
Right.
Like, I mean, more power to him, more power to anybody. That's not a problem. But it's just like, I was like, oh, that's a lot of weddings.
Right. That's a whole lot of weddings.
That was a lot.
And he's whole lot of weddings. And I would be interested to know like each relationship, like ages that it started and like how long it lasted and when it ended. And it seemed like he came from a really good family. Like his parents and his sister, they seemed to be normal and like loving. And so I just wonder, why is that not enough to kind of combat the feelings of like abandonment and not feeling wanted.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. He kept talking throughout the episode about his feelings of insecurity, how they never go away, and exactly to your point, like I mean, I understand, but also he was raised in this beautifully loving family who welcomed him with open arms. So,
right. I wonder at what point he found out he was adopted, because I don't think they discussed that.
Yeah.
I don't think
we've learned that. or if we will, but I don't know.
Yeah. And Lloyd and Leona, his adopted parents, I wonder what they knew about him, if anything, really, when they adopted him. What do you think? I mean, this is just guessing because that information isn't in there. But Lisa, do you have any thoughts about that?
That's a really interesting point. I know later on in the episode, Leona was saying that that she felt that his bio mom knew more than she was letting on to, but I don't know how much she knew. I don't know. That's a really good question. I'm not sure how much she knew.
Yeah. What about you, Cody?
I guess my whole thing with that is because I didn't realize how young he was when he was like left in that stairwell, and then like when they go back to the stairwell and he's like really upset. I was like, he must have been like 4 or 5 years old to like remember that and be so triggered by that location. But the fact that he was so young and so, I mean, literally an infant, it makes me wonder, like, did like the adoption agency like tell his adoptive parents like, this is where we discovered him, this is what happened, like I don't know how much they know or when they were able to tell him that he was adopted.
Right. And then I was a little unclear. I don't know if either of you picked up on this. So when they start talking about the birth mom, and when I say they, I mean Lloyd and Leona. So apparently one of them had contact with the birth mom and told him, you know, like, we've had contact with your birth mom, I guess, here's the information.
Right.
And he talked about how he felt guilty
Yes.
contacting the birth mom because it was like the day before Mother's Day.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are either of you clear when they got in contact with the birth mom? Because I'm not clear about that.
I had written down, I think it was in 2002. I was under the impression that it was when he was 39.
That is true, because he did say to her, like, Happy Mother's Day for the first time in 39 years. I get to say this to you.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, I wonder if they had just recently found out who the birth mom was. And I know they talked about the adoptions being closed.
Right. I don't know if it's correct or not. I kind of got the vibe that she had recently reached out. Oh, I wanted to make sure my son was okay. I thought it was recently. Maybe not, but you're right. I don't know if it was really clear.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to go back and
I
watch
know.
and get that information.
Right, there was just so much to take in. It's like these questions. I'm just like, I'm not sure because there's just so much to absorb. But yeah, I don't know the answer to those questions.
And so he calls his birth mom either the night before Mother's Day or on Mother's Day and says, like we just said, like, for the first time in 39 years, I want to wish you a happy Mother's Day. And she calls him back. So at this point, we're introduced to the birth mom, and we see the picture go up on the wall, and it says Judy Chandler. And then she is soon introduced into the episode, and she goes by Jude Guilford at this point. Cody, did you have any ideas about her immediately, like after seeing her and hearing her talk?
I was a little confused by her. I mean, I was confused by a lot of things, but I just thought it was so interesting that I guess I was more curious about where she was from the beginning, because if his father he says his father's the one who left him in a stairwell, like where was she at that 3.5-month-old time frame? Like, that's my question. And then like, how is their relationship now that like she seems supportive, but at the same time, I think she's also very like, he's trying like real hard to figure this out.
That's true, right? So I think very early on, we're introduced to the idea of like, he wants to meet his father or at least know who his father is. And Jude has taken the route of like, I don't remember that time in my life.
Right.
And so I think it was actually Jude's sister who said, I think she remembers everything.
Yes, you're right.
But like doesn't want to own up to it. And so she plays the card of like not remembering. And so, I mean, I just thought it was really interesting. Lisa, you have a comment?
Yeah. Well, it's funny. So when they were interviewing Jude present day, she did make the comment that she had spent those years trying to forget what happened during that period of her life. So I thought it was interesting that when he went to go spend that week in San Francisco with his mom. He was asking her all these questions. He wanted to know, what his story was, where he came from, and she was just kind of vague about it. Kept saying she couldn't remember a lot of things, and he made the point that he kept trying to ask her that whole week to see if she would remember more things, but he knew in his gut that she knew more than she was letting on to.
And then there's the letter that apparently she had written to the adoption agency, where she, so Gary asked for the name of his father, and then Jude says, oh, I think it was Van. But then she had written this letter to the adoption agency that was like, my husband's name. So that's the first time we found out they were married. She says his whole name, which was Earl Van Best Jr. And then she says, I think that Gary's story would be newsworthy. So you're lying to your son and going behind his back, it seemed, and exposing that all of this, right? Remember all of this. And so I just remember thinking, this woman is so shady.
Yeah, right?
Really?
So shady.
Really?
And when she started saying, my friend in the San Francisco PD, my first thought was, why does she have a friend that's in the San Francisco PD?
That's real interesting.
That's, willing to help her with this case.
Exactly. Yeah.
It was just super shady.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah?
Yeah, she's not... There's something, it's not kosher. Something's not right with her. Something's missing. Something's off. I can't put my finger on it, though.
Right.
So I thought it was interesting. When he first left San Francisco, he went and started looking for photos of his father and found had the old DMV photo given to him, which really ended up being his mugshot. And he said, look, so dead and lifeless. And then his mother asked Harold at the San Francisco Police Department for more information, and he told him to drop it. Don't look into this anymore.
Well, before that, Harold gave him information.
Right.
So he gave him his name, he gave him his social security number, and maybe some other information. Right. So it was that information that Gary used to kind of start the search for his father.
Right.
Which you just bring up such a good point. I wonder why Harold agreed to help him at all.
I know.
If he only wanted him to get so far before he was going to shut it down. So we've been introduced to Gary, who was adopted. We've been introduced to Judy, also known as Jude, who is the biological mother. And now we know the name for sure of Gary's father, which was Earl Van Best Jr. And we're given this information from Harold Butler, who works for San Francisco PD. And so Gary then starts to investigate because his mom isn't being the most helpful, and he really wants to know who his father is. And actually, I'm as I say that, the mom... Wasn't it the mom who was well, come back to San Francisco and we'll look for news articles?
Yes, yeah.
I'm as I say that, this woman was playing him.
I know, right?
She knew, I'm sorry, you knew this. And you're well, maybe we can just look for some news articles to see what comes up.
Yeah.
And then we're introduced to the ice cream romance. Lisa, tell us about the ice cream romance.
That was mind-blowing. I mean, I can't even, can you imagine researching your parents and finding out, that essentially he was a pedophile. She was 14 years old, she was 14 years old, his mother, that his father, saw her getting off of a school bus, and just article after article about their crazy whirlwind, being on the run. That's insane. I can't even imagine the shock he felt when he first started seeing those articles.
Right. So Judy was 14. I keep getting these names mixed up.
Earl.
I'm just
right.
Van. Earl is Van.
Van.
Van is 27. He sees her get off of a school bus. And I wonder if he had been stalking the school bus to find a wife, because that's just kind of odd that you see someone get off the school bus and then he gets out of his car, he approaches her. She says she wasn't interested, but he kept coming back.
Yeah, creepy.
Right, and then he invites her for ice cream, and that's where the love interest was sparked for Judy, and that's why it's called the ice cream romance.
Right.
And so they were married 3 months later.
Yeah.
Which I thought it was crazy that Judy went to juvenile detention in essence. She was, they never said she was arrested, but she was officially, I guess, detained and incarcerated in a way,
right? Yeah.
For being a participant in this illegal relationship.
Oh.
I wonder how they were able to get married because they went to Reno.
Good point. Yeah.
At least the law now is under a certain age you have to have parental consent. I don't know what the law was back then.
Right.
I should have looked it up, but I wonder how they were even able to get married.
Yeah, that's interesting because that's so wrong on so many levels.
Right. And then mom had the marriage annulled.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just talk about his commitment to being with her because they were separated at least 3 times, and I think he was arrested at least 3 times.
Yeah.
Bonded out every time, which is also interesting.
Yeah.
That he was able to keep getting out of jail and then he just kept going after her.
Woof.
And the fact that she was like sneaking out of juvie, the second floor of juvie, he told her, make that little rope ladder and go down. I mean, it's a movie. It's not.
I know, it is a movie.
I can't believe it's really happened,
And so the 3rd time, he takes her from the hospital.
Oh, that's crazy.
Oh, that's
crazy.
Right.
Dressed up like a doctor, snuck in, and took her out.
I have so many unanswered questions, like what happened to her hepatitis?
Yeah.
She was being treated for.
Oh my God.
Question.
What do you think, Cody, about, so now they're on the run, right? And they're headed, driving across country, so they go from California to Louisiana.
Oh, that's right.
Did you have any thoughts about kind of that excursion across country or when they made it to Louisiana?
I mean, that just seems like obviously they wanted to just be under the radar. Like, they were like, we got to get out of here. I mean, the whole thing is so convoluted and gross. It's, I can't like really fathom that it's a thing. And it's just, it's really just bonkers that they really go through so much just to be together when it's just so messed up.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And I wonder how much of a willing participant Judy was. Because when we hear them retelling the story, it definitely seems as though she was more kind of forced to participate versus actually wanting to be there. But when you make a rope out of sheets and scale down the
building,
then it seems like you're pretty interested.
You're pretty
right?
open to the opportunity.
Right.
Like, that's definitely, you're letting this happen.
Yeah. Or maybe the argument would be that he was brainwashing her because he was so much older than she was and plucked her kind of from a bad family. Like we, kind of heard about the family dynamics of Judy's home, and the dad seemed to be abusive and was a heavy physical disciplinarian, and so she was eager to leave that situation.
Right.
I also found it interesting when Judy described Van as being cosmopolitan and so smart, with her being so young.
Yeah.
That was an interesting moment. Like, when she describes it, I was just like, what? Like, what? I mean, he must have filled her head with so many, I'm going to say lies, and to make her think of him in that light that was such a bizarre description. Like, I was literally, I perked up when she said it. I was like, cosmopolitan?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
excuse me?
And who describes their boyfriends, girlfriends in that way at that age?
Exactly. Good
point.
point.
Cody, how are you describing?
I know.
Like, amazing, sweet, kind, so cute, so spontaneous,
nice to me.
Yeah.
Like, he's so intelligent. His conversation's so riveting.
Right?
Right? He can take me to places I've never been.
Right.
Okay.
I know.
Judy in 1960? I don't
it's such a romantic description.
Right?
Yeah.
You don't.
Maybe that says a lot about us. That
we're all just over-halojated.
Yeah. Lisa, what did you think about the part when they get to New Orleans and Jude says, I'm 7 months pregnant and he wanted me to, well, actually Gary says this, he wanted her to turn tricks.
I was in shock when I couldn't believe that. She kind of sounded like, to this day, she was still in shock saying that. I mean, asking someone you love anyway, to turn tricks is so disgusting. And then she's pregnant with their child and asking her to turn tricks. I mean, the whole thing is so horrific and disgusting. I can't even imagine. That was shocking.
Do you think he really loved her?
No, I don't think so. I don't know. Like, he's not well, obviously. I don't think he ever really loved her.
We're going to take a break and do the live read, Cody.
Heck yeah. Hey, all. So thank you all so much for watching, for listening, and for making us the ESPN of TV Talk. we could not be more thankful to have you all paying attention to us and giving us some time to discuss such an interesting topic. I know we're all super stoked to be here. If you're listening on iTunes, give us a thumbs up, leave some comments, subscribe. If you're on, same thing with YouTube, like chat with us. We got the live chat open. And yeah, like give us some love, some thumbs up and some likes. Yes. And yeah, and leave us comments. Like we'll do our best to get back to them as soon as we can. And I know I've been with AfterBuzz for what I turn you guys like for like 4 months now, and I know like anytime I have the opportunity to be on any show, I'm very excited. It's such a privilege to be here, and thank you guys for listening, because without you listening or watching, we would be just sitting here talking to ourselves. So thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you. That was great. So we left off with answering the question of whether or not we think Van actually loved Jude.
Right. I don't think he did at all. That's not love.
I actually think he did.
Really? Yeah.
In his own messed up way.
Right. I think that people are only capable of giving love in the ways that they know. And maybe that was the best that he could do. I mean, there was definitely something that kept him coming back time and time again. Like he literally risked his life and his freedom to be with this girl.
I feel like it was more of an obsession than a love, though.
You just took the words right out of my mouth.
Yeah, there's definitely that too.
Yeah.
But I wonder why she was the only one, because at no point was there ever any mention of him being obsessed with anyone else, and he had at least 2 other wives.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah.
True. I just feel like it's such a weird not that I'm a doctor, but it's like such a psychological thing. Like obviously he was a little messed up in the head, and it sounds like she came from a place where maybe she wasn't the best or treated the best mentally or physically. And I feel like maybe he like knew that, maybe he did like some pre-stalking and like found her, or like not found her, but like knew of her home life, and that's why maybe he picked her, because he knew like, oh, she was vulnerable. It just seemed like there was a lot of psychological nastiness amongst the whole situation.
Right.
So I hear what you're saying. Maybe it was his version of love, but it's so murky. I'm not even sure how to. I don't know how to say yes or no to that.
Yeah, there was a lot happening. He was definitely obsessed. I don't think that can be argued. And so they get to New Orleans. She has the baby in New Orleans. And you kind of mentioned this earlier. He struggled. So Van struggled with this baby. And then there were some allegations of child abuse or cruelty to the baby, and like locking the baby in a footlocker when the mom was at work, because Jude said like money got low, she went to work to like make some money.
Oh, that's right. He was born, and he didn't want to have a child, and then he also was out of work when the baby was born. That's right. I forgot about that.
Right.
And so then at some point he says, I'm gonna take the baby, and he does. He takes the baby. He takes a train down to Baton Rouge, leaves the baby in a stairwell. And the baby is luckily discovered unharmed, and then he's put up for adoption, and he's adopted, and that's Gary Stewart. What did you think about his choice to leave him in a stairwell, in an apartment building stairwell?
That's peculiar. I feel like a lot of, maybe it's like cliche, but a lot it's like outside of an orphanage or a fire station or something that's like someone the baby's being placed in the right hands. But I feel like, again, it goes back to being like a little psychologically off, that maybe it's like, it's not the safest place, a stairwell, but I think he must have known like somebody is going to see that there's an infant sitting here. I know like if I saw a baby in my stairwell at my building, I'd be like, I can't just leave this here.
Right, right. Well, Cody, since we're already talking to you, we're going to stick with you for special segments.
Yes. So we're going to discuss. So it's actually very similar to our situation with Gary, how he believes that the Zodiac Killer is his father. I want to talk about other famous or infamous killers and their children. And so who I discovered today is a girl named Carrie Rawson. She's the daughter of Dennis Rader, who is the BTK strangler. He strangled like 10 people, I believe, in the what part of Kansas? In Wichita, Kansas. And it was also very similar to the Zodiac Killer. He would also taunt the police with letters of like hinting at his murders and things like that. And so it's just very strange, because so she's his daughter, and he committed these murders from 1974 to 1991. After his arrest, he pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 10 consecutive life sentences. And in 2014, Carrie gave an interview, and that's the first time anyone in her family ever came out discussing him and being her father being a murderer. And the big thing was that I guess his situation was adapted by a Stephen King novel that later became a movie, so she was really upset about that. But then after the interview, she says that she and her mother had no idea that her father had been doing that until he was arrested. And the FBI showed up at their home in Detroit to deliver the news. She says she and her husband were in shock and had to deal with reporters hounding them. Over the next few years, Rawson coped with her father's actions with the help of a church and psychologist. She was in Michigan with a husband and 2 kids. But, like, I don't know how you... Like, I couldn't imagine anybody in my family, or just the FBI coming over to like, hey, by the way, like, your brother strangled, like, 12 people. Like, what? Like, I mean, she had a community to turn to help, but it's like, I don't know how you get through that. That's a lot.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for sharing. Yeah. Lisa, on to you with news.
AfterBuzz TV News.
Oops. Well, my news is basically about how Gary Stewart himself is being received. The docuseries is getting mixed reviews, and then Gary himself actually is getting mixed reviews. Some people are saying that he's coming across as cold and heartless and egotistical, that he's so wrapped up in finding out who his father is and proving, the point that he thinks he's the Zodiac Killer, that he's being insensitive to the people who actually lost loved ones, the actual people that were murdered. I don't know. What do you guys think? Like, do you think he's coming across as insincere and egotistical, or?
That's so interesting because I actually, having watched the at least half of the docuseries, I never really put it in that perspective, and I guess it's because it is a bit of an obsession for him to find his own identity and understand or figure out if this is the case. And I guess it is decently insensitive, like, to be like, oh, I need to find this out for myself. But, like, yeah, there are a lot of people whose families are struggling. That's, pay some homage to that, I guess.
Yeah. And maybe we'll see that come out more.
Right.
Yeah, as we continue watching.
Yeah. Because right now he's just really focused on figuring out, who his father is. Mm-hmm. So maybe as the story unfolds.
Right.
And he is convinced that his dad is the Zodiac Killer, and he accepts that and moves past that, then maybe we'll start seeing him address his feelings towards the victims and like sympathy for the victims' families.
Yeah,
maybe.
And I totally get like why, like, I see why it's for his own personal identity and like to understand himself and whatever. I completely get that and I support him for that. But I think the reason maybe it seems insensitive is because now there is so much light being shined on him in his situation, his side of the situation. So I feel like that's why maybe it just looks bad on his end. But sense. I completely understand why he would have this obsession to figure this out. Because I mean, if I wanted to know if my father was a murderer, like,
and it is his story.
Yeah.
It's his story and his search. So.
Right. Very true.
Well, what about predictions? What do you think is going to happen in the
AfterBuzz
next
TV
episode?
prediction?
Right. Oh my gosh. I don't even know what to think, because like, even our discussion now, like, I was like, oh my god, that's what happened. Like, because like I said at the beginning, I was a little like thrown off. There's a lot going on.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. And even I'm still. I mean, I don't know much. I'm like learning a lot about the Zodiac Killer as we go through this. So I don't know if. I'm pretty sure that I don't know. I really have no idea what to think.
I know.
I think at least a prediction though. I do think that hopefully we'll find out more from Jude. I think that she might give us a little more information that'll just like really open something up.
Just to jump in, because it's going to piggyback off of that with Jude. My prediction is that we're going to find out that Jude just is hiding something else. I don't know what that something else is, but she just seems super like sketchy to me. And she was sitting on like this chest of knowledge, and she's been like carroting Gary, like leaving him little drops, but not like giving him the whole story. And so I just think that we're gonna find something else out about her.
I agree. I'm anxious to see what's coming next.
Yeah, maybe she's like protecting herself and like trying to get him to figure something out without like implicating herself in anything.
I do believe her too when she say that that's a period of her life that she just wanted to block out. Like, yes, there are some things that she does still remember, but I think she probably did want to forget a lot of it. I mean,
yeah, I feel like there must have been a lot. I feel like maybe drugs were involved, and there was a lot of things they're not telling us.
I agree with that. There's a lot that we're not being told.
Also, that time, that day and age,
That's all the time that we have for today, so we got to wrap this up. Where can our viewers find you?
You can find me on Instagram at Lisa M. Macy. Lisa, 2 M's, ASI.
And I'm Cody Everson. You can find me on Instagram at Codyepp, CODYYEPP.
Are either of you covering other shows?
I'm on. Oh, you can also find me on the American Idol after show on Sunday evenings.
You can find me on the Project Runway after show on Thursday nights. Tomorrow is actually our season finale, stay tuned. Yeah.
And I'm Latoya Blakely. You can find me on Instagram at Latoya.Blakely or on Twitter at Blakely Latoya. Thank you so much for joining in. Until next time being in a few minutes. Talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.
Our founder, Kevin Undergaro, and me, Maria Menounos, would like to thank you for tuning in to AfterBuzz TV. Remember, we're not just the first, we're the biggest in the world, and we're the only destination for all your favorite TV shows. Whatever you crave, we've got it. So go to AfterBuzzTV.com and check out our lineup. Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.